Francesco Bagnaia arrived at the Australian Grand Prix with the weight of expectation on his shoulders. The absence of his teammate, Marc Marquez, sidelined with a shoulder injury, meant that for the first time in months, Bagnaia had the Ducati spotlight entirely to himself. Many believe this was his chance to make a statement, to remind the MotoGP world that he was still a champion, capable of leading the team in its toughest moments. But instead of redemption, Phillip Island became another chapter in what has been a painful season for the Italian star. When the dust settled, Bagnaia walked away without a single point. The weekend that was supposed to reignite his campaign ended in disappointment, frustration, and more questions about his future than answers. From the very beginning, the tone was off. Practice sessions offered no real sign of resurgence. The Ducati GP25, a machine that had once been an extension of Bagnaia's natural rhythm, looked unpredictable and heavy beneath him. While he managed to make it into Q2, a feat that hasn't been guaranteed for him this season, his lap times were lackluster. Among the 12 riders in the session, he was the second slowest. For a two-time world champion, that's not just an off day, it's an alarming trend. Still, there was hope that race day might offer something different. But the sprint would prove even worse. Over just 13 laps, Bagnaia's pace faltered drastically. He lost over 32 seconds to race winner Marco Bezzecchi, a staggering gap that spoke volumes about Ducati's current imbalance and Bagnaia's growing struggles. His average lap time was a 1:30.5. By comparison, Bezzecchi's was a 1:28 flat, meaning Bagnaia was 3 seconds slower per lap. In MotoGP, that's an eternity. Even more startling, when analysts compared Bagnaia's data to that of the Moto2 riders, the numbers were shockingly close. Senna Agius, who won the Moto2 race at Phillip Island, averaged a lap time of 1:31.3, just 0.8 slower than Bagnaia's. A MotoGP rider on one of the most advanced machines in the world, barely quicker than a rider from the intermediate class. It was a headline no one expected. To put that into context, MotoGP bikes produce nearly twice the horsepower of their Moto2 counterparts. The difference in speed, technology, and braking capability is enormous. Yet at Phillip Island, that gulf was almost invisible in Bagnaia's lap times. For a man who once dominated the premier class with precision and power, the numbers were difficult to comprehend. Of course, there were factors that contributed to this strange performance. Ducati struggled as a whole throughout the weekend. The wind conditions, tire wear, and unpredictable grip levels at Phillip Island have always made the Australian Grand Prix one of the most technically demanding events on the calendar. Even so, no one expected Bagnaia, the same rider who once made the Desmosedici look untouchable, to be so far off the pace. His sprint performance was dismal. He finished behind Somkhiat Chantra, the lowest-ranking full-time MotoGP rider on the grid. Even more concerning, he was only ahead of his temporary teammate, Michel Pirro, Ducati's veteran test rider who was substituting for Marquez. Pirro, despite limited race rhythm and no recent sprint experience, finished just 3 seconds behind Bagnaia. That kind of gap simply shouldn't exist between a full-time factory rider and a substitute. Then came the main race, and with it, disaster. Bagnaia's weekend went from bad to worse when he crashed out, marking his 4th scoreless weekend of the season, and his 3rd in just 4 rounds. Each DNF adds another dent to his confidence, and each missed opportunity pushes him further from the title conversation. To make matters worse, Bagnaia also faced a 3-place grid penalty after impeding Marco Bezzecchi in qualifying. The penalty barely mattered, though. His lack of race pace meant he was never in contention to begin with. The fallout from Phillip Island was immediate. Critics questioned how a 2-time world champion could struggle to such a degree, especially when riding the best machinery in MotoGP. The Ducati factory team, once a symbol of dominance, now looked vulnerable, and Bagnaia, once the anchor of that dominance, seemed lost. Behind closed doors, Ducati engineers are said to be concerned. The GP25, while powerful, has proven tricky to tame. Riders like Marquez have adapted their styles to extract its potential, but Bagnaia's smoother, calculated approach seems at odds with the bike's aggressive character. His braking zones are longer, his corner exits less explosive. In a sport measured in thousandths of a second, these tiny differences have snowballed into major performance gaps. For Bagnaia, it's a painful reminder that even champions can lose touch with their machines. What once felt natural now requires effort. Every corner, every gear shift, every line. It's all just a little off. And in MotoGP, a little off is the difference between victory and anonymity. Ducati's leadership has publicly defended Bagnaia, but privately, the pressure is mounting. The brand's image has always been tied to winning. Having their lead rider perform at a level comparable to Moto2 competitors isn't something they can tolerate for long. The Italian press has already begun to speculate that if Bagnaia's form doesn't recover soon, his seat could be in jeopardy. His current contract runs until the end of 2026, but rumors are circulating that Ducati is already exploring contingency plans. Sources close to the team have hinted that names like Pedro Acosta, Fermin Aldeguer, David Alonso, and even Fabio Quartararo are being discussed internally as potential replacements for 2027. Acosta, in particular, has emerged as the top prospect, a rising star who has shown raw speed, consistency, and the kind of fearless racing instinct Ducati craves. For Bagnaia, these whispers add another layer of pressure. Once celebrated as Ducati's golden boy, he now faces questions about his long-term future with the team he once called home. But as he's shown before, Bagnaia isn't one to give up easily. His response to adversity has always been to double down, analyze, and rebuild. The irony is that Bagnaia's struggles come just 2 years after he was at the height of his powers. In 2022 and 2023, he was nearly unstoppable, smooth, clinical, and mentally impenetrable. His back-to-back world titles made him the face of Ducati's modern era, and his precision made him a model of consistency. But MotoGP moves fast. In his post-race interviews, Bagnaia admitted that the weekend was one of the most frustrating of his career. He didn't hide from his struggles. The feeling wasn't there, he said. We tried many things, but nothing worked. I was missing grip, especially on corner entry. I was pushing, but I couldn't find the limit. When you're fighting the bike instead of riding it, it's impossible to be fast. Those words echoed the sentiment of a rider searching for answers. He knows the capability is there. The Desmo 16 remains the most complete bike on the grid. But unlocking that potential has become his greatest challenge. For Ducati, the situation is delicate. On one hand, Bagnaia is a proven champion with deep ties to the brand. On the other, MotoGP is brutally performance-driven. If results don't improve, loyalty often takes a backseat to ambition. The success of Marc Marquez on the same bike only amplifies the contrast. When your teammate, fresh from years of injury and recovery, is winning races while you're fighting for points, the comparisons are inevitable. Fans have noticed it too. Social media has been flooded with debates about whether Bagnaia has lost his edge, whether Ducati's setup favors Marquez's aggressive style, or whether the GP25's DNA simply doesn't suit Bagnaia anymore. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in between. Phillip Island, however, was a wake-up call. It wasn't just the crash or the lack of pace. It was the data. Being just 0.8 seconds quicker than the fastest Moto2 rider per lap is staggering when considering the technical differences between the classes. It highlights just how far Bagnaia's performance has dropped from his championship winning levels. For perspective, a MotoGP rider should typically be around 3 to 4 seconds faster per lap at a circuit like Phillip Island. The fact that he wasn't underscores the scale of Ducati's and Bagnaia's current struggles. Still, amidst the criticism, there's a glimmer of hope. Even the best have endured rough seasons. Valentino Rossi, Jorge Lorenzo, and even Marc Marquez have all faced moments when their dominance evaporated overnight. What defined them wasn't the fall, it was the comeback. Bagnaia now faces that same test. He remains defiant. Every champion goes through tough moments, he told reporters. The important thing is how you respond. I know my potential. I know what I can do. It's just a matter of time before we fix it. The road ahead won't be easy. The emergence of younger rivals like Bezzecchi, Martin, and Acosta means the level of competition is fiercer than ever. But if there's one thing Bagnaia has shown throughout his career, it's that he thrives under pressure. As MotoGP heads toward its closing rounds, all eyes will be on how he responds. Can the two-time world champion rediscover the rhythm that made him great? Or will Phillip Island go down as the race that exposed a permanent fracture in his partnership with Ducati? For now, one thing is certain. Francesco Bagnaia's name still carries weight. He's been down before and always found a way back. But with his lap times now being compared to Moto2 riders, The urgency has never been greater. Every race from here on out will shape not just his season, but possibly the future of Ducati's factory lineup. MotoGP is a sport of moments. And for Bagnaia, the next one must be a comeback.